Want to talk? So let's talk. Yeah. Talk. You want to talk? You gotta talk. You need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
You gotta talk. You want
Welcome, my friends, to Talk to Solomon. That's me, Stan Solomon. I'm the host.
I'm Chief Steve Davis, the in-studio co-host.
And our other co-host is Brent Johnson, the creator of and the proprietor of freedomradio.us. Brent, are you with us?
I sure am. And by the way, I want to mention that I just completed and had posted up on the freedomradio.us website a new podcast. I interviewed a woman who lives in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. And 3 months after the shootings in Sandy Hook, I thought it would be nice to have somebody who was actually there, who could talk about not only what she saw, but also what the reaction and the attitude of the people in the area is in the aftermath of that shooting. It's a fascinating podcast. You might want to check it out at freedomradio.us. Also, check out our new look. One other comment. Just before the break, you were doing an ad for TR10, and I just want to tell you that's what I use in colloidal silver. Okay, it is absolutely great. You know, sometimes you hear the guy who created it say it's great. You may question that, but I'm telling you, I'm a user, and it is absolutely terrific product.
Well, thank you very much. Now, there's a reality in America. That reality is not just in America. It's been throughout human history. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. It's a scientific law. For all the attempts to take away people's guns, to take away people's ability to defend themselves, to take away a people's ability to get their thoughts and their views out, to take away people's ability to be heard, reality has done exactly the opposite. More people own guns, more people are being heard, more people are speaking up, and we're seeing it all over our society. And I say that in the context of all this terrible stuff that's happened, and we've got this terrible president, and the Democrats have become a terrible party, and the Republicans are just Democrats in light clothing. So we have a lot of people very concerned and frustrated. But I just want to talk about a few issues because we have Brent and Steve here available, and Alan could make it. And I want to start with this story. In Talukan, Afghanistan, if I'm saying that right, Taluqan, 74 schoolgirls in the far north of Afghanistan fell sick because their school was inundated with some sort of a noxious or poisonous gas. To the best of my knowledge in this story, none of them have died, but it is well known that Muslim extremists in many countries, not just Afghanistan, believe that women belong in the house, in the kitchen, in the bedroom, in a position of subservience to men, and they enforce that with honor killings, with killing young people young girls that are trying to get educated, with rapes, with beatings, with the like. And the same hypocrites, I'll be kind, in this country that are concerned that a woman wasn't treated sufficiently respectfully when someone says you don't belong in the men's room if you're a reporter, you don't belong on the front lines if you're in the military, you don't belong in a country bar in the middle of a brawl if you're a female police officer because your partner's going to get hurt trying to keep you from getting killed, or they're going to get killed because you can't come to their aid. These people go crazy, but they're incredibly silent on these issues. I'll start with you, Chief.
Well, I remember one of our guests some months ago described how the Muslim community really looks at women, and they don't look at them as human beings at all. Look at them as sexual objects from head to toe. Everything about them is only here for sex so they can reproduce and make more Muslims. And so that's why you see the women dressed in the burqas and the totally concealed clothing, because in their view, any part of a woman can excite a man because that's all they're for. And so as long as they have that kind of view, women can never have any type of a place in society where they can go to school or have a job or do anything else like that. So what we're looking at here is, I think Americans go like, why in the world would they want to bomb schoolgirls? You know, they're just schoolgirls. But it's not about that. It's about the idea that women are not allowed to get an education. Their mission, in their view, is only to be sexual objects, period. And they mutilate them, they torture them, they defile them, they sell them as little girls to old men. They do all these things that should just appall us to no end. But like you said, people like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, they are totally on the side of these Muslims, even though they do this because they associate themselves with the world domination view that they have. But this is appalling. But the reason is because the Muslims do not want women to have any place in society other than just as an object of sex.
Brent?
And I do agree with what Steve said to a certain point, okay? And one of the real important points that you made, Steve, just now, was that Hillary Clinton and people like that go along with this attitude. This is not exclusively a Muslim attitude. There are people all over the world who who think that women should have very specific roles. Now, there's an argument, by the way, there that men and women were put on this planet. They are different. They are not the same. They are not supposed to be the same. Therefore, there are certain roles. For example, the women are the nurturers, the ones who are supposed to protect the family. The men have traditionally been the breadwinners and all of that. Now, I'm not suggesting that women shouldn't go out and work or anything like that. But I am suggesting that it's unfair to ascribe what happened in Afghanistan to these young girls necessarily to Muslim terrorists. It could well have been exactly what you said, Stan. But the NATO coalition, as it is called, has perpetrated all kinds of atrocities. U.S. soldiers have perpetrated all kinds of atrocities in the name of this undeclared war, unconstitutionally declared war in Afghanistan. So I think it's unfair, to say that only the Muslims have these attitudes around women. There are people all over the place who have historically had very repressive attitudes around women. And it's also important not to forget that in America in particular, personally, I don't go out with American women anymore. And the primary reason for that is American women have been indoctrinated to think they are the same as men. This thing with the, with the restrooms and all of that. I don't think women should be in combat. It's not that they can't fight. I don't think that there's any question that they can fight. Sometimes women fighting is more vicious than men. But I don't think they should be in combat because they protect the family. If the women go into combat and they all die, what happens to the family? The same kind of thing about, the restrooms and all of that. I do think women should absolutely have an opportunity to an education. And I think what happened in Afghanistan to these young girls is horrible. I just don't want people to go away thinking it's got to be the Muslims. Maybe it is, but there are others out there who think this way about women as well.
There's a story about a stampede. There were 10,000 head of longhorn cattle stampeding. Now, somewhere in that stampede, there was also a groundhog and a prairie dog and a squirrel. 400 or 500 people got run over and murdered. The groundhog, the prairie dog, and the squirrel may have set foot on one or more of those people. But they aren't the issue. When it comes to mistreating human beings, and particularly women, Muslims are in a class, radical Muslims, not all Muslims. Muslims are in a class by themselves, and their religion teaches this garbage. That's simply fact. But I won't debate the issue that there are other jerks around. No question about it.
No, absolutely. And one other brief story I think is interesting. Years ago, I had a friend named Mary Ann, and she was engaged to a man named Harvey. And Mary Ann was the first woman who was ever appointed to head up a defense contractor organization in Saudi Arabia. And she was not allowed to come into Saudi Arabia unless she married Harvey. She actually had to marry Harvey before they would allow her into the country, because they would not allow a single woman to be, and even though this was in an American complex in Saudi Arabia, still the Saudis would not allow her into the country unless she was married. So there's definitely a point there.
All right. Let me talk about something else. A former Utah high school math teacher was arrested Friday on charges of raping a 17-year-old female student. The math teacher was a female named Courtney Gerald, 22 years old. She also coached the high school girls basketball team. She resigned after she was charged. The only thing they say about this woman, she's a nice lady, no one expected of her, which all may be true, I have no idea, don't know the lady. But I promise you, this lady will end up with either no charges or they'll plead it out as a misdemeanor as long as she gives up her teacher's license. And some may think that's fair. But if a 22-year-old male teacher was involved in sexual intimacy with a, whatever the girl was, 17-year-old female, the man would go to jail for sure for rape, for all kinds of reasons. And if he was guilty, I would want it to happen, but it's a double standard. Now, let me take another story. A lady who's an admitted lesbian carved a cross into her own chest while faking an anti-gay hate crime. Her name is Charlie Rogers. She pleaded no contest. The sentence, 7 days in jail, which was in fact time that had already been served. Her horrifying tale of gay bashing abuse generated sympathy and fear and most likely money. 7 days. Now, I won't say 100%, but I will say the majority, probably a substantial majority, of all quote-unquote hate crimes involving swastikas or derogatory remarks are always by someone that would benefit from the focus and or the interest in the story. Now, you're a police officer, or were a police officer for decades and decades, because you're an old fart. Tell me, please, sir, how often did you find when people claimed that they put a swastika on their door or wrote the N-word on them, like Tawana Brawley or any of these, how often did you find that they were actually not valid?
Well, I've never really experienced a situation like this where someone has lied about a hate crime, but in my experience, though, I'm really not a fan of hate crime legislation. If someone makes fun of you because you wear glasses or because you're a Catholic, I don't think that's really an issue. If someone breaks your arm because you wear glasses or you're a Catholic, I think the broken arm is the issue, not really why they did it. So I just think this puts a lot of misconception on crimes and on bad behavior as to the actual why. Sometimes it's needed for a motive to solve a case, but as far as hate crimes go, I think it should be something that we send by the wayside. In my opinion, the action is what happens, is what we should look at, not the why in that particular regard. But in these cases, in the homosexual community, you're going to find this, or you're going to find they demand absolute tolerance and acceptance of them, but vice versa never happens on their side. Also a very closed society where they want access to everything that we have or the normal populace has, but you're never allowed in anything that they have at all, any business adventures or establishments where they go and have fun together or whatever. None of that's allowed. If you look at a lot of the major sporting events, if you watch women's college basketball and see who's refereeing those games, that's a closed society. And it's just wrong because they demand everything and we get nothing from them in return other than hate crime, false hate crime reports.
All right, let me ask you a question. If someone were to call the police and report a crime and it was made up, that is a crime, to report a crime that didn't happen, right? Or
Yes,
to lie to the police.
In most communities, in most states, a false report of a crime is in itself a crime.
All
Yes.
right. 7 days?
Well, I don't know what the statute says about making a false report. What this has gained a lot of notoriety because of what she said and what it is. You know, if she would have made a false report about somebody stealing her dog, it would have been a little different story, but probably the same amount of punishment as this because the crime would be the same.
Brent?
Yeah, and I agree with Steve on the idea of a hate crime. You know, if somebody kills somebody, somebody murders somebody, whether they hate the person or not, the person's still dead. And they're no more dead because it was done with hate. Okay, the idea, okay, that somebody's feelings for the victim in some way enhances the crime, I think is ridiculous. A crime, again, government of law, not men. If it's a crime, it's a crime. Okay, whether or not you hate the person is irrelevant. Also, the woman who raped the student is not a nice woman. I don't know anything about her either, Stan, but if she raped a student, that action says that that is not a nice person.
Right, and she would claim they were in love, they were in heat, the student was seduced, there wasn't physical force. You know, the bottom line is we have laws. You mentioned that before. We're a nation of laws. If someone, in wherever that place was, Utah, if you have to be 18 in order to give consent for sexual intimacy, then if you have sexual intimacy with someone under that age, you're breaking the law. It's called statutory rape. If you're a teacher and you use that relationship, which we call a power relationship, or you know, like a boss, then that in and of itself is both legally and ethically absolutely wrong. And we talk about creating that kind of an environment where someone goes along because they're afraid you'll affect the other part of the relationship, the grade, be able to play on the team, whatever the case may be. I think that this woman is one of the lowest life forms that exist. I think she deserves the death penalty. But that's just my opinion, and I could probably be talked out of that. 100 years of hard labor would suffice. Reasonable?
Well, if she's executed, she'll never do it again. Hard labor, she may, that doesn't hold water.
Speaking of execution, now, there's hypocrisy, there's the height of hypocrisy, and then there's a guy named Anthony Weiner. This is the guy who showed his sexual appendage to people, women he didn't know, he assumed they were women, sent them out while married to a woman who was pregnant, by the way, and now he thinks that all's forgiven, and he started a Twitter account. Remember, he claimed his last account was hacked? Well, it was whacked, but that's another story. Now he has a Twitter account called @AnthonyWeiner, and he puts his tweet was fighting to keep New York City the capital of the middle class. And then he has one tweet. He's not following anyone, and he has 15 followers, and 14 of them are in porno movie houses. Does anyone want to comment on this piece of crap?
Well, he still has his old Twitter account active, and he still has quite a few followers. He could very well become the next mayor of New York City.
Yeah, because for New York City, if you show your Obama, that's considered an advantage.
Actually, I heard Greg Guttrell earlier. He said that it should be illegal. It is illegal to place a suspicious package somewhere, so he should qualify wholeheartedly for
under terrorism
for showing a suspicious package.
Yeah. Suspected of being.
On the other hand, in all honesty, anybody who can get rid of Michael Bloomberg in New York City, you know, I mean, anybody who can get rid of Michael Bloomberg.
Well, Michael Bloomberg is going to retire as mayor and run for Pope. He thinks that the fact that he's Jewish is irrelevant, the fact he doesn't believe in God is irrelevant, and the fact that he thinks he's God that's relevant.
But then we'll have Anthony Weiner's wife involved in this.
Yeah.
And that's another dangerous person.
Exactly, another terrorist. 3 murder charges against that Dr. Gosnell, that murdering bastard in Philadelphia, have been dropped because his lawyer said, you can't prove those babies were alive. Just because they were moving about and kicking doesn't mean they were alive. That could have just been whatever. And the judge said, all right, we'll dismiss 3 of the murder charges. Now let me say this carefully so no one will confuse me for doing something that's crossing the line. Somebody kill this son of a bitch, please, and I will contribute to your defense fund. The chief is saying absolutely nothing. Brent?
No, I'm thinking.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, you know, this is legal machinations. Way back when there was a constitutional amendment that actually prohibited lawyers from holding political office, and it was the original 13th Amendment, and it was referred to as the Titles of Nobility Amendment, or TONA. And since attorneys, by definition, and you can actually trace it back, all attorneys are members of the bar, all bar associations connect to the Illinois Bar Association, which directly connects to the London Bar Association. And the TONA constitutional amendment prohibited anyone from holding a foreign title of nobility and serving in public office in the United States. And a barrister, or an attorney, is actually a British title of nobility. It's what allows you to speak in the King's Court or in the Queen's Court. And so the original 13th Amendment, which was actually published in 24 states, it was ratified, it was made part of the Constitution. I have an old 1853 book that lists the Constitution of the time, and it includes that amendment in it. In the 1870s, after the Civil War, it started to disappear from all the books, all the law books. And today, very few people know about it, but it nonetheless was a legitimate aspect of law in the United States. Frankly, I think it would be a good thing. Imagine what Congress would be like if attorneys could not be in Congress. And this is some kind of a legal game with the Gosnell case that, well, we're going to say that, you can't prove in the eyes of the law that these babies were alive, and therefore there can't be any kind of murder charge. And that's all it is. It's legal trickery. And I agree with you. Somebody ought to just take this guy out. I mean, this guy literally cut the spines of babies who had been born.
What goes around this comes around. I have a pair of snippers I'll lend anyone.
Well, let me add this. Over my course of my many decades, as you said, of law enforcement experience, I've seen a lot of trauma. And I was just thinking about where was there ever a case when if a victim was injured or damaged and they moved, that the medical personnel or the officers wouldn't attempt some type of medical rescue. I can't imagine that happening. So unless someone has obviously been dead with rigor mortis for a long time, if there's an injured person there that we would think is dead, I'm saying we as the emergency rescue personnel and the police, and they moved, they're going to get some kind of CPR, some type of first aid, some type of immediate treatment. So for them to say because these babies were moving that they weren't alive, that's just a bunch of crap.
And what kind of a pig of a judge would sit there and just, rather than let a jury decide it, what kind of a pig of a judge would sit there and just say, oh, okay, and we'll just dismiss that?
Well, on that sorry note, we're going to call it a night. Brent Johnson, thanks so much, folks. Go to freedomradio.us. Check out all the great stuff that's there. To Chief Steve, who has served his country and his community for these many decades, and now is serving by giving input and opinion. Thank you for being with us. And to all of you who spend time watching us, thank you so much. We wish you Godspeed, and may he protect you from this low life in the White House and her husband. Good night, America.